Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by the Padawan YouTube channel. In today's episode, we're going to go over all the species and creatures that we could find and identify from the first episode of The Mandalorian, the new Star Wars TV show that's streaming over on Disney Plus. So stick around and we'll get right into it. All right, so we'll try to go in a basic chronological order of when they appear in the show, and then save a few of the ones that we couldn't identify and some mystery ones that we'll be looking into for the end. So, to get right into it, the first real creature to show up, or species, is the Quarren. Quarren have been around for a while. They're the tentacle faced, kind of semi aquatic species that we've seen really throughout canon. We saw a lot of them in the Clone Wars cartoon show, and that's where they really broke down some of their more interesting features. You know, the tentacle face. They can actually spit some squid-like ink, which we didn't see in the show. But they're from Mon Cala. With the Mon Calamari, and they're kind of a more aggressive species. There were some in the Rebellion. They were kind of all over the galaxy, so they're a pretty common one, and it's cool to see him show up here. This guy's a big brute, and he's got kind of the funky tongue sticking out. So that's number one, and we see him kind of really holding down our second species. This one is new to the Star Wars universe, as far as we know. He refers to himself as a fledgling Mythrol, assuming fledgling just means younger. So Mythrol is what he's going with. They obviously blue face, kind of creature, the deep, swamp thing kind of looking guy. Got fins or gills on the side of his face. All right, so moving right along, the next one up is the Kubas. We've seen these guys before a few times. The main one that I think most will remember is in A New Hope. This guy sells out Obi-Wan and Han and Luke to the Empire for some money. But they have the long snout and the goggles that cover the eyes. This guy's kind of neat. He's got the little flute and calls them the speeders. Good looking character model, pretty interesting. So that's what we got with the Kubas. Then we have our first really non-sentient. The Mythrol mentions Ravanax in the speeder when they're going, so that's most likely what we're seeing here. It's a big walrusy hippo-looking thing under the ice. Pretty serious jaws. It takes out a speeder in one bite, and then is able to latch on to the Mandalorian ship and pull it down. So it's got some power, and this guy's a big guy. But for all we know, non-sentient. I don't think it's a speaking member of the galaxy. So that's kind of our first creature. Moving right along, we got our first sighting of a Rodian. We'll see them a couple times in the episode. The first one is actually in carbonite, frozen in carbonite, in the Mandalorian ship. The second time and third time we see them are in that in the bounty guild, bounty hunters guild cantina scenes, and they're floating around. Cool coloration, little yellow and red. Obviously, Greedo, and a lot of them we've seen have been more of a green variety, but they vary. I think there's a purple one in the Clone Wars, so it's pretty neat to see this coloration. Looks good, great character model, and it's cool to see a lot of the original creatures back, and species back. So then moving right along, we have a couple Trandoshans, actually 3 in the bar that I can count. These models look really good. Trandoshans we first saw in Empire Strikes Back, bounty hunters, the bounty hunter Bosk. And then we saw a lot of them in the Clone Wars. I'm not sure if we saw some in the prequels. I'm sure somewhere along the lines we did. But these character models look great. They're a little more humanoid, which makes them feel a little more real. We've seen them fighting in a couple of the scenes for the previews, but not in this episode. They're just kind of hanging around in the background in the cantina, seemingly listening in on the Mandalorian getting that secret job from Grief Karga. Next up, we have what we think, it looks like the helmet that Zuvio and Enzo, the bounty hunter, wore. Their species, Cayuzo. This very well could, this could be anything, let's be honest. But the helmet looks very similar to a Kyuzo helmet, and we never really see the face. He turns kind of sideways in one of these, and you can kind of see it almost looks like a semi-mask. So, I mean, it'd be neat if it was Kyuzo. It's also a good call out. I mean, just to keep in mind. Keep looking for it. All right, we have a bunch of humanoids in the bar as well. I'm not going to go over all of them. Obviously, there's a ton of species. If something pops out, like horns on the head that we can call out, like a Zabrak or something like that, I'll mention it. But there's so many with just slight variations of tattoos and stuff that aren't clearly defined different species. So we'll just go with humanoids. Then we kind of get outside. We see some Jawas. Not sure if it's confirmed that this is or isn't Tatooine, but that'd be interesting because I think we've only seen Jawas in canon on Tatooine. Although all the comics, there might have been some traveling, so it wouldn't be a shocker. They look like they're doing their thing, junking on the streets. So fitting in well there. We then have a poor Kowakian monkey lizard getting fried and grilled over the on a spit, and one that's alive that's watching. That's rough. They are a sentient species, so that's cruel. As annoying as they may be, that's pretty cruel. Then in the background we can see a Swearton here walking. Now this is interesting. If you go back and watch The Last Jedi, excuse me. If you go back and watch The Last Jedi, these guys are in the Canto Bight scene in the casinos. They're also written about. There were three of them. They're also written about in the Canto Bight novel of the short stories, and they're pretty interesting looking. They're like little lizard guys. This guy's got his mouth wide open with a big smile. You see him twice. You see kind of the back of his head earlier, but this is the clearest shot of him. Then in the background here, we can clearly see a Twi'lek. More of a pinkish red coloration, which is neat to see. Again, some of the original trilogy aliens coming back. It's great to see. Then on the side here, right before he goes into the Mandalorian hideout, this is an interesting one. Not positive, but I also believe this may be one of the guys from the Canto Bight scene in The Last Jedi. I'm going to go with Ketarian. Or Katerian, maybe. I'm going to go with Katerian on this one. Keteerian. Interesting little pickup. Again, reusing some of the models from The Last Jedi is what it looks like, which is really neat to see, especially in a different light. Then our second and last for the episode that I could find non-sentient, we have some blurgs. These are really fun. These were originally introduced, I believe, in the Ewok made-for-TV movies. They look a lot like dewbacks. I think some people were mixing them up. Dewbacks are longer and just have the four standard legs, much more like an iguana style. These guys have the big old legs with little like T-Rex arms, and just they're pretty much all mouth and face. Kind of look like a fish head. But these are fun. We see them riding. We see the Ugnaught Kuil or Kuli riding them. And so that brings us to our next species, the Ugnaught. We've seen these guys around the galaxy in all kinds of canon. First showing up in The Empire Strikes Back on Cloud City. They seem like mechanic junkers, kind of little guys like that. So, and this guy's played by Nick Nolte. It was a pretty cool scene. I have spoken is his little line. But yeah, so there's the Ugnaught. Moving right along and getting close to the end here, we have the Nikto. So these are the guys at the base at the Mandalorian and IG-11 take down at the end. Nikto have been all over canon as well. Big time involvement in the Hutt cartels and in cartels in general. In Bloodline, their Rin Riven Dai is a leader of a cartel that's mostly Nikto. They come in a bunch of colors. Red and green are the main ones, and we see here kind of like that. The red is that orangey yellow skin color, and then you have the green ones that are definitely brighter. But you see the horns on the face. They're similar to Weequay and Klatooinians, but these are pretty clearly Niktos, and obviously there's a ton going on here. So they very well could be some Klatooinians or Weequay mixed in here. But I think the purpose is mainly that they're Niktos. which is interesting because who knows if we're behind like a Hutt cartel here, or this is part of Rin Dai's operation, because they had ties to the First Order. So it would be very interesting to see if this was the beginning of that. And then finally, we have the last known species, although I guess known is strong. We have the Yoda species. Obviously, a lot to speculate here on. We'll get into it on the podcast, but this is one of the coolest things. You know, the Yoda species. We've only had Yoda and Yaddle. If you want to go back to the Old Republic non-canon stuff, you had Vandar, who was also a Jedi. But they're all the representations have been in the Jedi Council. Not many at all. Long-living species. And I believe I read that George Lucas just, this was the one thing off limits to people. Like you couldn't get into Yoda's homeworld, his species. So it's pretty much known as Yoda species. And this little guy's 50 years old, so he would have been born before the Phantom Menace. So he was around when Yoda and Yaddle were on the Jedi Council. So it's interesting. It'll be very interesting to see where he comes from, if we get a little more lore on their species, or if it's just a character-driven thing that this will be, you know, a new character and have some importance, or if we're actually going to get into the species. So we'll see what they do there. All right, the last section we want to get into is a few aliens that we clearly saw but don't have defined species for. We'll go from kind of the closest guesses that I have to the ones that I just have no idea. The first one we see a bunch, and I'm not sure if it's the same alien or if it's supposed to be the same species, but it's this blue guy at the beginning. He kind of originally looked like an Abonito, which was like Eloatzi he was one of the X-Wing pilots in The Force Awakens, and Adimuva, who was in the Poe Dameron comics. So they've been around, but after looking at it, it doesn't really look like his mouth. He has more of a snout than a mouth at the bottom of the curve. And the Abonitos we've seen haven't really been this colorful. They've been kind of more of a brown, leathery color. So this guy's definitely bright blue. So we see him a couple times, as we can see in the footage here, or something that looks like him, whether they're all different species, all different people. We don't know. But doing some research, it looks like they showed up in the Canto Bight scene again. There's a great website, alienanthology.wordpress.com, that has a great breakdown of all the aliens in the Last Jedi. And this guy looks to be the same model that they used there in one of the scenes. What we came up with after looking at it, and then going through a lot of Wikipedia and some of the alien anthology books, while not exact, it actually looks like a Wondon or an Onodon, Onodone, which was actually from Maz Kanata's castle. Now, this guy is not bright blue, and he has a longer snout that kind of wraps around. But it's almost the exact same model, obviously different color. And I don't know that we ever really see his snout cut off. So if it's wrapped around, or if there's different, maybe females or males have different snout lengths. So, I mean, that would be my best guess. He's very similar to the Onodone and this Last Jedi creature. So I think we're pretty confident that it's some version of that creature. So next up, we got the two mysterious aliens playing Sabacc. One has pretty much his whole face is a mask, so maybe it's a droid. It gives me, kind of reminds me a little bit of the Tognath, the like Edrier two tubes from Rogue One, but it looks a little more metal around the eyes and stuff like that. So really don't know what this is. Be fascinated to see what you guys think in the comments. And then he's playing with this other guy who has kind of like a top face mask and then just tentacles underneath. I don't think it's a Quarren. It looks a lot smaller, and the tentacles they look stiffer. They don't look kind of the same. But really, I couldn't find anything. Can't find anything on this guy. So again, be interested to see what you guys come up with. Obviously, like we mentioned, we have a whole bunch of humanoids in the background. I didn't pick up a ton of different things that stuck out. One was this guy right here with kind of the two peaks on his head and the wide eyes. Looks like a lot of different species combined. I don't know if it's an insectoid type thing. Couldn't nail down an exact anything that looked really that close. Also looks like he has some kind of, if it's hair or whiskers off the top of the two peaks, or if that's some kind of apparatus, like breathing apparatus. Again, be interested to see what you guys come up with. And then lastly, we have this guy, this red and black looking tattooed. He's got something on his face, and it looks like he has kind of a ridge on his head. We see him a couple times between the two Trandoshans here, and then we also see him kind of in the background. We never the between the two Trandoshans is the best view we get, and I really couldn't find anything. Definitely an interesting looking character, though. Definitely an alien. So we'll keep an eye out and see if he comes up again in other content. And that's pretty much it. If you guys saw anything else or want us to get into it, I'd love to see what we come up with. And also on these mysterious aliens, if anybody has some answers and a good picture and reference link, we'd love to get into it as well. All right, I appreciate you guys hanging out. Please check out the podcast, the Padawan Podcast. You can find us on Spotify and iTunes. Do it pretty much every week, and we're going to be going over every Mandalorian episode and getting deeper into the lore. But for the creatures and species, that's what we got. All right, take it easy.